911, what is your emergency?
Units respond code 3 to a 1050 on the highway. Vehicles are blocking multiple
We're en route
lanes
to the
of travel.
hospital. Patient is currently having
We've got a
cardiac
4-alarm
arrest and has
fire
been
here.
intubated.
Send additional
Protesters are
trucks.
outside of City Hall and they are not complying with our
Out
orders
on
to
1. Hold the
disperse.
air.
In a rapidly changing world for first responders where it seems that every day the rules and norms are changing, there is one voice you can count on to give you the latest in emergency news. That is Lifeline. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Lifeline 911 Podcast with your host, Erica.
Hello.
I am your co-host, Gary, and today we are joined by a very special guest. Alex Chiasson serves as the Director of Technology for AEP, American Emergency Preparedness. Alex is also a 911 dispatcher for the city of Waltham, Massachusetts, for more than 7 years, and also serves as a CTO for his division. The city of Waltham borders Boston and has a population of around 70,000. The PSAP uses its operators to serve as police, fire, and medical dispatchers, and also uses ProQA to help ensure that all of the calls are handled in a uniform and precise manner. Today we'll be discussing with Alex how exactly that works. Alex, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. Erica, Gary, thanks.
Welcome. So, in the intro for everybody, Alex is definitely a member of AEP, which you guys probably know and remember. I also do some in-person instruction and online webinar teaching for them. So we do have a little bit of background, and I think that's going to make it even more interesting. Alex, so I think before we got started, I was asking you about the training aspect of it, because for everybody that's been listening, they know that it takes us about 3 months or so for a call taker and about 4 and some change, almost 5 for a dispatcher, because our disciplines are separate. But that's not the case for you guys, right?
No, yeah, so we, in a combined center like ours, so we do police, fire, and EMS all together. The training schedule is generally, we'll generally hire in groups. So like, we'll try and catch it for the state 911. We'll do academies every so often. So we'll hire up, coming up, leading up to the academy, and we'll hire maybe like 3 or 4 people at a time, send them all to the academy. They're there for a month, and then they come over to us, and we have them for probably like a 3-month period. So it's 5 rotations of a 4 and 2 schedule per person per training.
Wow.
Yeah, so it ends up being you'll get 3 trainees, and that's to learn the 3 disciplines. So at the end of the 3 months, you've kind of jumped around to all 3. Just kind of gotten 3 perspectives on how to do all those things. And then you've got a 2-week period of our training coordinator kind of watching, just observing, basically, watching you kind of do your thing.
Okay. Like
Yeah.
the shadow part.
Exactly, yeah. And it's not like when we're going through it, we're not expecting them to be like masters of their craft after 3 months of doing 3 jobs
Yeah.
directly. You know? It's, so yeah, there is still a learning. The learning curve is definitely nowhere near over by the end of their training program. You know, it's one of the, like I was saying before we started, like me and almost everyone that I work with, like, didn't feel comfortable, like super comfortable with it until like several years into being on the job. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I was trying to figure out like the exact time where I did feel completely comfortable with it, and I'm like trying to figure out exactly how long I've been there, because that's the point. Like, yeah, my first 7.5 years, you know, I was kind of like, oh, I don't know, but
Yeah. Yeah.
you know, every day is different. You know, you're always coming across something that you've never had before, so it's just kind of learning to. A lot of it, so much more of it, is learning to roll with the punches than it is being absolutely proficient at everything that you do. You know.
That is so well said, because Gary and I just had a conversation. And of course, we have this conversation a lot, wouldn't you say, Gary, about
Oh yeah.
training and I love the way you put it. I've totally adopted the saying, you're looking for bronze level. We're not looking for
Mhm.
gold at all. We're looking for baseline. And that is one of the challenges that we are struggling with in our center, is because we have this batch of CTOs that are, relatively new, and they're signing off or attempting to sign off on dispatchers and call takers, but more dispatchers, they struggle, I think, with finding that that philosophy, just what you said. They're not going to be proficient. They're going to be at a baseline. And I find it really interesting with all three of those disciplines because they never really get to I don't know, settle into any one of them, right? Before they're released and then they just kind of go.
Hmm. Yeah, right. It's hard to kind of yeah, it's tough like kind of as a CTO getting a mindset for what you're supposed to be doing in relation like it's like two people learning at the same time. Like no matter how much you do it, it's always a learning process, right? Like
Yeah.
my personal experience is I've only CTO'd one uh group of people, so it was two guys. The first time I did it, it was we call it phase one. So it's this guy is fresh out of the academy. He's never seen
Hmm.
any of this before. Uh, and I'm with him for like 5 weeks straight. And then the second guy I had phase three, so like the end of the process where he's already like he's seen pretty much all of the usual stuff, like he can do things. And phase three is a lot more of like uh it's like the clay is already molded. Now I'm just doing like the fine print kind of stuff. And
Nice.
yeah, I thought that I like phase one scared the can I
Sure.
swear on
Go ahead.
Go
this
ahead.
is okay. Phase
We
one
already
scared
had Ted on, so
Thank
yeah.
you. Yeah, I should have asked that before. Phase one scared the shit out of me because I was like, I'm gonna like set this guy on the wrong path like immediately. This is gonna be terrible. But I
Hmm.
phase one I ended up loving. Like it was, uh, I loved like showing this person like what we do in a very gentle way, kind of like bringing them into the fold.
Hmm.
Just explaining things, like having the time to explain things and really kind of get into it. Whereas phase three I found like was way more difficult. Like I know I come off as a very like aggressive person, so yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, it was kind of like phase three I found way more difficult, like the kind of hammering on kind of thing. It's
Yeah.
yeah, because I feel like a lot of what we do is very especially like in a combined center, there's so many things to kind of have to keep track of. To be 100% on all the time is like that's how you burn yourself out. It's
Hmm.
Agreed.
phase three is tough because you want to ding them on everything that they're kind of not doing up to standard, but you also
Hmm.
don't want to like make them lose like control or make them like desensitize them or sensitize them maybe is the right way to put
Right.
that.
Or well, you don't want to break their spirit, also,
Yeah.
because you have to towards the end of the process, you have to nitpick a little bit, right? Because we're trying to smooth out the rough edges. We know that perfection doesn't exist because Gary and I talk about this all the time, and we're constantly trying to share this with our baby CTOs and some of our intermediate CTOs because it takes a really long time to get seasoned good at teaching and learning all of the balance that you have. But I agree with you. The beginning is, I don't know if that's my favorite, but I did enjoy it because you get to take your time, you get to explain everything, and you get to lay the foundation. And I think it's a huge responsibility because you are the things that you share with them and the perspective that you give them is going to carry them through the rest of the training. And you want to lay that foundation right. You don't want lumps and bumps and misinformation and, a whole lot of my way of doing things in there to sway them, like you said, set them on the wrong path. So I think it's incredibly important to have that same type of perspective when you are bringing people into the profession, because where you start them off, it'll carry them, and if they learn bad habits and bad philosophies from you from the beginning, that stuff sticks.
Yeah, it is a lot of. I love how you called it, like building the foundation, right? 'Cause
Yeah.
you're trying to create like not like the Adonis of 911 operator. You're
I
just
love
trying to
that.
make like a person that you want to work with. You know, it's yeah, it's a lot
I'd li
easier doing the broad shapes than the fine tooling. You know.
and I like that also, and I can't wait for people to hear this because we're probably gonna, do a little bit of bouncing all over the place because it is, but I think in our profession, we welcome people really, really well. Uh, I'm being facetious there. We don't. We say goodbye really, really well, but we don't welcome very well. And when we're training them, sometimes I don't know if you guys have that problem in Waltham, but I know for us, we struggle with making sure that people understand that we are not looking for perfection. And we want to, what we're really creating is not someone who can just do the work. We're not creating a replica of ourselves. We're creating a colleague. Someone that when we all walk through the door at the same time, we plug in, sit down, and go get it. That's what we're creating rather
Mhm.
than just showing someone how to do it and then sitting back and checking the boxes and saying, yes, you can do this. No, you can't. But if you're creating a colleague, coworker, someone who is going to be in the thick of it with you day in and day out for years to come, I think that changes the way you approach training. So I really like the way that you put that, and I'm stealing that just so you know.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great way to put it because it's something like how I was talking about how like nobody is perfect all the time, right? That includes ourselves, right? So when we're training someone, we want someone who can have our back as much as we have their back.
So since we don't do EMS and fire at our agency because it's just massive to be able to cross train everybody at all three disciplines would just be an undertaking. I can't even, my head starts to spin thinking about it. When it comes to EMS specifically, you guys use Pro QA. How do you teach something that is already set? I don't know if I'm making sense because with PD, there's no protocol, at least not for us. I don't know if you guys use protocols, but how do you teach a protocol?
I honestly, if it's something that's written down and like very explicit, I kind of find that a lot easier to kind of portray to someone, especially in training, than something where it's kind of like because I'm sure you guys have the same things that we do where uh a lot of things kind of get handed down, kind of not like not in writing, but just kind of like uh just got a call from top brass. They want this specific thing to happen, and especially if you're new, you want to like the way that I learn things at least is to know why we do things.
Mhm.
Makes me remember things way more than anything, and it's especially if we get something that's kind of arbitrary. It's a lot harder to kind of get that down, and it's if you're operating on like a foundation of kind of arbitrary rules, it's hard to kind of stay afloat, you know. Or like we honestly for Pro QA we only ever use it for fire and EMS. Uh,
Okay.
Police we have our like police manual, like the general things like we go by code. Like for each code we have like the amount of people or the amount of officers that we'll send to each specific thing.
Okay.
Uh, but yeah, it's
Like
police side is
SOPs,
definitely
basically.
exactly yeah yeah
Okay.
police and it's those can kind of change like it's as I'm sure you guys know no one
Really?
in or no
They
two are
change?
exactly the
They change on a regular basis, like sometimes every other day, it feels like?
Yeah, I got this email that has this new policy in it, so let's do that. Oh, I got one from the day after. It has a different policy. So I guess I can really see the benefit of using Pro QA in that aspect because it's like, nope, this is set. This is what we're doing every time, always doing it the same way, rather than having hundreds of emails that you've got to try and remember the difference on each one of them.
Oh yeah, I have coworkers that can do that really well, and am still trying to figure out how they do it. I've like no working memory, the memory of like an ant or something, you know.
That's hilarious. Kids,
Uh,
well, we have those too, where they can spout off. Well, this email that was sent back in 1922, and it was 5 days after COVID, and the day before this, that, or the other, and it was written by so and so, and it's got this SOP involved, and I mean, and meanwhile, my head is just spinning, and I have catchwords and catchphrases to help me remember. Or I have Gary, and I can say, Gary, do you remember what we're doing on this thing? Because in our profession, it's ever changing. It's always, best practices are always revisited. I think that's one of the things that makes it really hard on new people coming in and hard on us, because especially for Gary and I, we're in supervision, so we're expected to remember every policy ever handed down and every variation on every policy ever handed down. And if we don't, our people are looking at us like, what? You don't know? And you want me to know? So I can see the comfort in something like Pro QA, because it is exactly the same all the time. So I guess here's my question though, EMS specific. Have you ever delivered a baby?
uh, yes, with an asterisk.
Uh,
I did. I
What?
was on the phone when it happened, but I did very little work for it. I'll still take credit for it, of course, but
Oh, cool, yeah.
Ah,
it was more like I got a call from someone who was like across a parking lot. It was like, I got this lady in a Subaru Outback. She's having a baby, and I was like, oh, okay, let's. So you go into the process, and by the time she got to the other side of the parking lot, baby was already out. It was already figured out. Uh, so it's just kind
what?
of doing like the kind of afterbirth care, I suppose, before EMS showed up. Which luckily they were right down this, like basically on that same street, so it ended up being a very an easier phone call than you would expect for the subject matter of it. Uh,
Oh,
That's
but
a
yeah,
good thing about babies. They'll deliver themselves
yeah,
when
they
they're
want
ready
to
to
come out
go.
for something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
the EMS thing that you do, so Pro QA, that's where they have, what is it? The breathing counter. What do you call that?
Breathing diagnostic, I think is the yeah. So it's
Okay.
just kind of
So you have
getting.
things that if that were to go wrong, what do you do?
Do you mean like if something were to happen on the other side of the phone line, or if like the tech stopped work, like uh,
If the if
like if I tried
the
to
if
do a
the
breathing diagnostic and it didn't work?
yes, yes.
So we luckily we have I mean, as I'm sure you guys know, Gary, especially like technology is not infallible. Like it's
No, no, it is
every
not.
like device I've had is
I mean, just
like
look at
so
CrowdStrike.
close to break. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. It's always stuff like that coming out. I feel like especially with more regularity as time progresses. But like we when we're training, we're teaching them also to use both ProQA on their computers, but also we have physical cards at every position. Because I think it's definitely happened to me before where I've been like in the middle of a call or about to start a call and you press that send EMD button and just nothing happens or like your keyboard
Oh,
stops working. Because it always
dun dun
happens like at the worst
dun.
possible moment. You got to like very
So,
quickly like roll over to these physical cards and kind of go through it. And it's a lot less intuitive because it's a lot more like reading, especially if you like you try and I try and look at them pretty regularly just to kind of like stay up at it. But like it's always when you forget to do that and it's been a couple months, that's when the computers fail or
Of course.
just something doesn't go right. You're kind of
Mm.
scrambling, but it's
I
yeah,
can
it is
imagine.
something. Yeah, oh yeah, it is something where we try and mirror it as much as we can. Like updates will happen to the desktop version, and we kind of very quickly have to get the updates on the physical cards as well.
So to back up just a bit, with ProQA, that's basically a system where you've got a series of questions that you have to ask in order, and based on the responses to those questions, it tells you to go to a different part of the card and say, okay, this is the next step. It's a little like a choose your own adventure book, except the person calling in is choosing their own adventure in terms of like this: if X is happening, go to page 3. If Y is happening, go to page 7. Right?
I love that you called it a choose your own adventure books because I love those. And yeah, that's exactly what it feels like as you're going through it, right? You're asking the question, you're getting the answer, and then you're looking at a list of options to where you kind of switch to.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, definitely when you're doing the physical cards, it definitely feels like that, like you're like literally going through a book, going to each new thing. Uh, and I think that's so when we like guy fresh off the boat looking at these things, we'll teach them the on paper version first so they can get
Mm-hmm.
kind
Okay.
of a roadmap of like how it works physically. And
Okay.
then after they have kind of a good understanding of like how these routes work, then we'll show them the desktop version, which kind of does a lot of the flipping for them. For them, it's just
Right.
like pressing a button to go to one specific part or not.
Yeah, and that helps to kind of take, I don't want to say the decision making pressure off of the operator, but it helps to make sure every operator is definitely doing it the same way each time, because you're letting the caller kind of guide you with what their responses are. So when they call in and they're like, somebody's been shot and they're choking, you're gonna go
Wow.
to the like they're having a bad day, but like you'll go to like the choking protocol or whatever first to make sure that they are breathing before trying to staunch the bleeding, right?
Absolutely, yeah, yeah. It's airways the most important, right? And yeah, it's they're definitely going through it, different priorities of how you're going to handle the information that you're getting. Uh,
Hmm.
and it kind of it doesn't spell it out for you perfectly. Uh, like that's there are constant updates that are going through it.
Hmm.
And they like I've me and Justin, AEP's director of operations, we both talked to the guy that designs it, and he's like it's fascinating the way that his like brain works, like thinking about it, because it's very he's almost like a poetry editor or something, like getting every word, uh like every axiom that's in there, every word is like specifically chosen to be there, every phrase is specifically chosen in a way to make the call taker uh choose the right option, or kind of like to get their brain to work in the right way. It's very meticulously kind of designed,
That is
which I
that is interesting, huh? So when you say every word is chosen specifically, is there I seem to remember there's like a board or there's like an entity that governs EMS protocols, or is it a company? I feel like it's a governing agency, or something like a EMD school. Am I on the right track at all, or no?
kind of I honestly am not sure of exactly how it pans out either. I know the cards that we use, I know there are a couple different companies that will do this specific thing. We use Priority Dispatches cards, and there are a few other uh,
Okay.
companies that do the same thing. I'm not sure. I'm assuming there has to be some sort of uh, like partnership or handshake kind of thing between these companies and like the state organizations.
Like with some medical
Yeah,
board or something, because there has to be a medical entity that has has either checked off or approved the things that even they are putting in here, because I can't imagine it's just some guy that used to be a nurse 30 years ago is sat down at some company that, that is a consultant now, and it's just saying, okay, this is what you do for a heart attack. This is what you do for, a person not breathing. And this is where we get our chest compression count from. This is, the the breathing thing. I think they call that, like, if it's ineffective breathing. So I got a couple of catchwords in my pocket. The ineffective breathing, I think, which is like agonal or something like that. So I'm thinking that there has to be a medical point of contact somewhere that governs
Yeah.
this stuff, because you can't just have people who used to do the job a long time ago throw these things together. Now this is what we're using for a life-saving instruction. Interesting. Yeah, I want to talk to that guy.
Yeah, no, you're
Definitely.
you're absolutely right. And I think a lot of the designers are have been in the field and have done medical training beforehand. Like it's a lot of it
Yeah.
is yeah, it's like you're right, like with ineffective and agonal breathing, like there are very specific tools that we can use that are in the program for those specific situations.
And your
Yeah.
trainees are having to learn not just that, but how to have conversations with people, because it's not just, tell me exactly what happened. I know they say that because I hear our EMS personnel say that when we're on the phone with them. Is it you're having to teach them how to talk to people? It's not just tell me exactly what happened and then it's just a robotic script that's going from there. You're having to actually teach them how to compassionately speak to someone, right? Or is it just that?
Kind of a mixture of both. Like it's we will get graded quality control wise on like saying protocol exactly as they're said, like word for word, because that's how they're
Hmm.
designed. Like
Okay.
I work with a guy who will. It's like fascinating watching him work and go through the protocol because he'll say everything exactly as it's written every single time without fail. Uh,
Okay.
and that's something like I like because you're talking, you've done this a million times. You're not gonna enunciate every single word, but per the protocol, we're supposed to do that every single time.
So let me ask you this, Alex. Since your center is kind of interesting in the fact that your fire and EMS use ProQA, but when you're taking a police call, you you just kind of rely on the SOPs. Do you have a preference?
Uh, it's kind of shifted the more that I've worked. Like starting out, I was definitely way more comfortable with the ProQA side of it, where uh, you know exactly what question to ask, and based on the answer, you know exactly where to go. Whereas starting out at like fresh on the job, you get a call about like a B&E or like a break in progress or something. You like one, you're freaking out because you're trying to get that call in as quick as possible, and then you're also trying to
Yep.
think of like the like 100 questions that you need to ask as quickly as
Yep.
possible and in the right order.
Yep.
Um, Whereas the more I've done it, like now, especially like those calls are kind of like it's still like a little nerve wracking, but there's more of an excitement to it where I've done enough of those or I've like thought about the process of doing enough of those that you kind of kind of the broad strokes of what you need to get out quicker more than others. So you kind of no, it's kind of two sides to the same coin, whereas one is a lot more kind of like rote and uh exact, I guess.
Now we've talked about EMS. We did the police thing. You guys take the calls. Actually, I'm gonna back up a little bit. So you take the call and you dispatch the call at the same time, or how does
Yeah.
that work?
So we're kind of a small center, I suppose. Like our Waltham has depending on the time, so like regularly our residents are like 70,000 people probably.
Mm.
Whereas we have so many businesses during the day, like 9 to 5 on weekdays, our population is up to like 120, 130. So
Wow.
it's a yeah, very different environments depending on when you're working. But our center is, I think we're just up to 24 now. Uh, and all 24 people can do all three jobs, right? So it's a call comes in, uh, call taker sitting there, taking the call, putting the call in. As soon as they put the call in, everyone on the floor can see that call pop up. And I kind of like it because
That's so
actually I
cool.
want to see how you guys do it too. Because let's say, like, hypothetically speaking, I'm on the police radio or something, and a medical call pops up that our police protocols we have someone going to, or if there's
Mhm.
something where the police and the fire side need to kind of coordinate, instead of having to like call or put something into a computer, I'm on the police side and I'm getting up and I'm yelling over to the guy in the fighter radio like, "Hey man, what are we doing with this?" You know, it's a lot more. I like the ease of kind of being able to like communicate with someone via voice, but also like seeing them physically. I feel like that
Wow.
helps with the communication so much more. Yeah. How I'm so fascinated how you guys do it. Like how like let's say you have like a building fire or something where you've got fire going, you've got EMS going as well, and police too. It's a huge kind of ordeal. How are you as call takers and police dispatchers coordinating with the fire side? You know,
So we have a computer aided dispatch, a CAD system that when we put the calls in, like everybody can see it. Generally, we're on our side of the house, we're only looking at the police calls, and then fire is generally only looking at the fire calls, and EMS are only looking at their medical calls. So we're in a I would say a much larger space than you guys are, because if we tried to yell over to fire, like you'd have to do that at like full throated volume. It's usually more of a message, and then even more common than that, we just send the card over to them. So we send them like a request for assistance, like, hey, we need fire out at this location for X and Y and Z. So there's not so much interaction between the agencies, and even within our own agency, between call takers and dispatchers. Most of that is handled over like a CAD message, or you put the question you need answered directly into the call.
that's fascinating. So you guys are essentially all three are still in the same room. It's just the size of the room is way bigger.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like
Yes.
the
Maybe it,
size of a football field.
yeah. Oh my god! Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then
It's
I was thinking about that. You're probably not too far off on that, Gary. 'Cause I don't know how many square feet it is off the top of my head, but it's pretty big.
what is that?
If you
Don't they say everything's bigger in Texas? Is that?
yeah, it's true. It's very true.
It's very
Yeah.
true. Yeah. So
Oh,
for us, that call takers, we have now this actually is taking me in a little bit different direction because of the small size of the agency. Do you guys have, or you probably don't have, a problem that we have, which is we like to call it the invisible wall that separates the two disciplines? So for us as a 911 operator, when you come in to our agency, you are at it's considered entry level, and to move into the radio police dispatch, that is the only place that you can go. That is the next place to go. There is no go train at fire, go train at EMS, because they are separate entities. So you guys are all one, I don't know about happy, but you're all one big family. Wouldn't you say? Because you do what they do what you do, and there's no disconnect. Whereas call takers don't dispatch and dispatchers don't take calls. So for us, that creates what we call that invisible wall, where they don't understand each other as well as we would like. You guys don't have that problem.
I, uh, yeah, absolutely. I think you're completely right that that is something that exists, right? Like with us, where we all know the three jobs that or like we're all trained in the three jobs. So like say if I'm on the police radio and I get a call in and something's worded in a specific way, like I've done that enough that I kind of like, and I know that person well enough from working with them day in and day out that I kind of know what they're getting at or have a better idea of what the situation is just given what I'm looking at on the screen,
Yeah.
you know?
And who
Yeah.
you have
And
probably a camaraderie that doesn't exist in an agency the size of ours. I mean, don't get me wrong, we have people that are friends with each other and they create relationships across the disciplines. We get along with the fire people, we just don't see them very often. So we don't, unless you've done that work before and at a different agency and you come over to where we are, you don't understand the language. 'Cause I couldn't begin to tell you anything about what it is to dispatch a fire call. With knowing what you know and you've been in the profession as long as you have, if you had to pick a discipline that that was the only one that you could do, you have one that just speaks to you more?
um it's kind of hard to say. So one of the things that I like about being able to do all three and having the option to do all three kind of whenever is that like let's say if I'm only a call taker and I'm going in, eventually I'll just burn out on that. Really, like you do the same thing day in and day out, it gets kind of
Mhm.
monotonous. Whereas now I have three jobs to pick from. So like let's say if I did call taking like three times out of the four shifts last week. This shift I'm gonna do the other two and stay the hell away from call taking, you know? It's kind of
Nice.
you're able to jump ship kind of whenever you want to and kind of coordinate with your coworkers to like divvy out the work or divvy out the workload as
Nice.
much as possible.
That is awesome because that is a thing that we struggle with in our agency because of the fact that you're a call taker. You come in now. Don't get me wrong. We have non-emergency report writing that we do, so that's a completely separate skill set. And then we have teletype, which is another skill set that is attached to our 911 operators. So they wear a few more hats as opposed to dispatch. Because if you once you're a dispatcher, you come in the house as a dispatcher, that is what you do. The only thing that changes is the sector that you work or the district or channel.
Probably can't help to be able to kind of be able to do both or have a passing familiarity in what one or the other is doing, right? I'm sure it's got to be a headache training everyone on a new job all at once, right?
It's gonna be a ride because we are finally at where I think we're very, very close to full strength. Isn't it 105 or 106, something like that, Gary? 911 operators were supposed to have just that
Yeah,
discipline
for
and
the
about 75 or so dispatchers.
yeah, and I think
Yeah,
we're at 88 call takers now, and I think we're at 68 or 69 dispatchers.
Ooh, we're getting there.
that is fascinating. I can't even imagine like I know you were saying the size of the room is gigantic, but I'm having trouble like visualizing that. Like that's uh wild. Like especially
I
like
will
what
send you a picture.
please see it. How does it work if you guys have like multiple, like say you have like a huge car crash where you have like 20 people calling in? Um, how do you how do those 20 call takers communicate? Is it all through the CAD system? Like they're all putting in notes?
Yeah,
How is that for like the police dispatcher that's putting it out? It's got to be like they're immediately seeing like a huge laundry list of notes and having to read through it like on the
Well,
fly. That's got to be very
yeah.
challenging.
Actually, it is kind of like that. So if let's just say a huge crash on our major thoroughfare, I-35, the first call comes in, that whoever gets hit first starts the call. And what the others do is the CAD system recognizes that there are other calls coming in very close proximity to the first one. And it gives them the option. It says, hey, call that you're working on right now is really, really close to this one. Take a look. Is it the same? Is it related? And they have to decide based on the information that they're getting and the map that is popping up on their screen, if that is indeed the same call or is related, or should they put in something completely different. Once they decide that it is the same call, they can append or attach their set of notes, and they start going in. It's amazing because the system recognizes that they go in a certain order, right? So it's never, wouldn't you say, Gary, the notes aren't all over the place, right? So it kind of goes in a chronological.
I guess I would lean more towards all over the place because you're going to have people that are like the different callers are going to be experiencing the event from their own perspective and their own angle,
That's
and
true.
then
You're right.
and then yeah, and then each of the call takers isn't, since we don't use ProQA, each of the call takers is going to be taking those calls in their own kind of way. So a lot of
True.
times, especially if it's a big
Right.
car crash, you might have like a lot of them transfer over to the fire department to handle that. But you know, as the information's entered, it is going to kind of be, you're in Vegas and you don't know if you're going to get 2 apples and a banana or pineapple or whatever. Um, so it is kind of a lot to go through, but especially for like a car crash or something, most of that is just being done for documentation purposes. Like you don't have to read out every line of text
Right.
that comes in. You're just okay, there's a crash here. Medical personnel are on the way, and I need a whole bunch of cops to block off the road or what have you.
Or if like one of the cars takes off, you've got all these descriptions coming in because 2 or 3 people saw it, and now I like it because it's like a big puzzle. And as the dispatcher, I'm just thinking about from when I was doing that, I'm scanning the call and I'm looking for key pieces of information. If I see the same thing over and over again, I know that I've already given that piece of information out, so I can, unless it's different in a specific way that adds value to the way that we respond to the call, then I gloss over that. But I'm also looking for guns, knives, sticks, bats. I'm looking for, ejected people. But it's one dispatcher for that call. So we have 10 radios, 10 channels. And so wherever it lands, that is the only dispatcher that's dealing with it in a perfect world, unless, of course, it crosses over that imaginary line of either jurisdiction
Yeah.
or the way we splice up the city. So it can get really interesting. If you're ever in
It
Austin, Alex, you can come sit in. You'd love it.
I would love that. Yeah, it's trying to get down for South by at some point. I don't know if it's next year. That's probably the worst time to go down there.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
if you come down for South by, the last thing you're going to want to do is come hang out with us. You're going to be busy hopping bars and listening to music and I don't know what all ever else extra activities you might be doing. Yeah, we're just gonna
We'll
leave
see.
it like that.
Yeah. But yeah, I think it does make sense. I wasn't even thinking about that. Probably uh the difference between the technology that my combined center uses and your separated center uses are it seems like it's tooled to both specifically, right?
Yeah,
Like if I get a call in, it's at most like 3 or 4 people putting notes into this call. So depending on the call, it could be a lot of notes, but me as a police dispatcher, I'm able to like go through them all quick. I'm not getting information from all over, Where your center, I think it's you've got a lot more kind of a streamlined way of taking all this information and kind of working through it, and that's a lot more technology based than
it is.
yeah.
But don't get me wrong, there are days when we wish we could just stand up and yell and go, "Hey, what's this?" It wouldn't work, but at which point Gary and I'd be like, first of all, why are you standing up yelling? And are you okay? The reason why you're yelling, because we don't yell like that. Do you need EMS? There was all kinds of questions that would be happening for us.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah. Something that, even though we do have a small room, something that we use that I can recommend is projectiles. If you got like even like
Okay.
a sheet of tape, toss it over. It's not gonna hurt.
Let's
It'll
not
be fine.
let's not give out ideas for for that.
Yeah, because some of our people listen to this. We don't want them to get the wrong idea. You guys sanction this on your podcast. And knowing our group, that's exactly what they'd say.
Well, that's all the time we have for this week. Alex, thank you so much for joining us, and I really appreciated the insights that you provided on your center and how it works, and it was a good discussion I think we had.
I do it. I've got this picture in my head of what Waltham must look like with people standing up and yelling and throwing paper planes and stuff. It sounds amazing.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for having me. I had a great time. Yeah, it's I promise it's not as chaotic as it sounds.
No,
Only
don't take
sometimes.
don't take that visual away from me. I need that. That sounds amazing because ours is very controlled. So that's the visual I'm sticking with. Yeah.
And we and we hope that you all had a great time with us. And from all of us at Lifeline 911 Podcast, I'm Gary,
America.
and we will see you next week.
Thank you for watching our production of Lifeline 911 Podcast. If you have any questions about the topics we discussed today, or if there's something specific you'd like us to cover in a future episode, send us your questions at lifeline911podcast@gmail.com. Stay safe out there. Until next time, this is Lifeline 911 signing off.